Welcome to Mr. Giant Reacts and Ting and Ting and Ting. And people always wonder, is there racism in Serbia? Is there racism in the Balkans? Is there racism there? And I found this video here of an expat, an African American woman who is living in Belgrade, and it's going to be her experiences or whether or not she thinks the, there's racism in Serbia. So let's go ahead and take a look at this from a perspective of someone who is living there that is of African origin, ancestry, or whatever. Let's go. Let's go.
Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's topic, I want to talk about how there is no racism, no anti-Blackness, no colorism in Serbia. Now, I know that is a huge statement to make, but I've been living in Serbia for the last 2.5 years. I'm American from a small town in Massachusetts, and growing up, I believe many of my peers have been told that the world is a big, scary place. In the history of the US, Canada, Australia, and other colonial powers definitely have deep-seated racism in their societies from the past to the present, and there's this whole belief that many Black people around the diaspora believe that there's anti-Blackness no matter where we go, whether you're in South America or in Asia, Central Asia, the African continent, and especially in Europe, that there's just so much racism and so much anti-Blackness. So you should just stay in your small town and don't go and explore the world. And I knew growing up, I wanted more for myself. I knew that I can't just go based on what people say. Yes, I read a lot of books, but seeing and experiencing for yourself that the world is not as big and scary as it is. And Serbia is one of the only places in the world that has no racism, specifically against Black people. There's no anti-Blackness, so let's dive into this topic.
Yep, let's dive in.
So I have some notes because we're going to talk about history, society, whiteness, context of that in the Balkan region or former Yugoslavia. So be patient as I read some of my notes. So, unlike many Western countries and nations like the US, Canada, South Africa, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Serbia, or former Yugoslavia has no history of slavery against other groups of people. In fact, Serbia, or Yugoslavia, was under Ottoman rule for centuries, okay? And while that period was complex, it didn't involve the transatlantic slave trade or any systemic oppression of Black people. That's the most important facts. So during the era of Yugoslavia, under Tito's leadership, and some Serbs please correct me if I'm wrong, the country was a key player in the non-aligned movement. This movement fostered relationships between Yugoslavia through trade, diplomacy, and education. So Yugoslavia welcomed students from the regions of the African continent, Central and South America that influenced the culture and the education systems we see today. So while Belgium in the 50s had human zoos, it was during Yugoslavia in the 50s that they welcomed students from the African continent to study. So a person like myself from Massachusetts, where they had education in schools were very much implemented in the 50s in the US, especially Massachusetts. While it's a blue state, there is a long history of the white flight or segregation. And I believe Massachusetts was the first state to desegregate schools, at least in the northern region. But here in Serbia, no. People were welcome to study. People, even to this day, many African students come to study at the universities in Serbia. Progressive, right?
Check this out.
Now, let's not confuse racism with prejudice. Racism is more systemic, as in you can't get a bank loan, you can't live in a certain neighborhood, you can't work in a certain workplace, you have to use separate bathrooms. Any systemic policies, government laws or policies that classify different groups of people or prevent them from socially mixing, marrying, living in certain spaces, getting bank loans. That's racism. Prejudice is everywhere. All human beings, all people, mammals or animals have some type of prejudice. Because if you don't know someone, obviously you're just going to judge or just going to be a little bit more skeptical. Here is what gets fascinating about Serbia. So, Serbia, or the Balkan regions, so Serbia, Montenegro, Croatia, Albania, Bosnia, Slovenia, Slovakia, which I know those are in the EU, but technically they're in the Balkans, and Macedonia, has a very different history and lens of how they look at people by race. Versus in Western Europe, Portugal, Spain, France, the UK, whiteness is very different or similar how whiteness is looked at in the US versus in the Western Europe to the Balkans. Okay. So in the Balkans, or at least in Serbia, everyone technically is white. Okay? However, in the Balkans, what separates people is not by race. It's really more so by ethnicity and religion. So in Serbia, most people are Orthodox Christians. In Bosnia, most people are Muslims. In Croatia, most people are Catholic. Now, during Yugoslavia, and again, Serbs, correct me if I'm wrong, Vienna, they don't have those class of race here. And I remember when I first moved here, they do have a census. And when I was looking at the question, there was nothing about my race. Interesting, right? So when people come here, or when they hear no racism, you're looking at race in the lens of how America or former colonial powers classify people by race. But in the Balkans, specifically Serbia, they don't have that here. So, and I'm focusing on racism and anti-Blackness against Black people here. Or Black people, whether they're African or Black from the UK or from other European countries that travel here. There's no systemic racism. I open a bank account at the bank easily. I rent a property easily. I go to a store, no one's stopping me. Easily. No one's following me or being suspicious of me. So,
must be nice.
Whereas if I was in the States, yes, as progressive as we love to think that American society is, there's so much history and racism embedded and threaded in American society, in the economy of how the schools are made, the tax system. There's just a lot, subtle or not, in the US, and I'm sure in South Africa, which interestingly has a large Serbian community. So when it comes to the history and how whiteness is here, I stand out more as a American woman versus standing out as a Black woman.
Yeah.
I've been
I
to a
could
lot of
dig that.
diplomatic events lately. I go to a lot of social networking events. I have friends that are Serbians or
That is so true. You know what I mean? When you come to the islands and stuff, most people don't go. They ask you where you're from. You know what I mean? They don't. Of course, they do have the distinction: white. White people this, white people that. But then, the crust of it is to find out what country you're from. And I guess that has to do with tourism too, because we get so many different people from different parts of the world coming there to visit and stuff like that. So I think that's it more so than anything else. And it seems like Serbia is kind of like that. I'm not saying that some people, like she said, racism is systemic. There are prejudices, yes. But racism is systemic. No, anybody could go get a house alone and stuff like that. So it's kind of similar.
of other nationality. Nationality trumps race. I never have to think, oh my gosh, I'm the only Black woman in a room. For me, I went to an event the other day and it was like, oh my goodness, I'm the only American in the room. And people find it wonderful. And I find it like, wow, I stand out because we're the Americans. There is an American community here. There is an American Chamber of Commerce. Of course, there's an American embassy. But as far as in business and socializing, I stand out specifically because I'm American. People coexisted together. Despite, yes, everyone was white, but the divisions were the religion and ethnicities. And somehow they made it all work until, everything fell apart. But that is a different story. There's no racial hierarchies in the Balkans, or at least specifically Serbia, like we see in the US when we do the census: black, white, non Hispanic, white, Asian, Oceania. They don't have those class of race here. And I remember when I first moved here, they do have a census. And when I was looking at the question, there was nothing about my race. Interesting, right? Colorism affects all types of people, not just Black people. I know there's a lot of colorism in Asia, and I used to live in Thailand and China. And I know for many East Asian or South Asian or Southeast Asian cultures, colorism, depending on how fair or pale you are, is very much part of the society. And this is before the UK or the British came to Asia. Asian society is not at the lens, again, of white supremacy. It's more so the fairer you are, the wealthier you are. They had this concept a long time ago before the West came and arrived to Asia.
Yeah.
So when I was in Thailand, people still treated me with respect. Thais are very nice, but many of my Black friends were like, well, if you know the language, yeah, people treat you, they're just not the kindest. There's a lot of racism, even in the ads when it comes to the skin creams. Some job ads say they prefer fair skinned people. Yeah. If you don't know the language and you don't see the subtleties, yes, colorism is very much present in Asia. Technically in the US, I'm brown or light skinned. But here in Serbia, I'm just a Black woman. And I've seen all types of African women, Black American, Black British people, Black Australians. They come here and no one has ever told me, oh, wow, I'm dark skinned, so I'm treated differently. Like, people don't, you're Black, whether you're light or dark. There's no distinctions of, oh, I'm treated better because I'm fair skinned. No, I'm treated maybe better because I'm American. There's American privilege, that I will not deny. But in regards to color or colorism, no. And I know actually a lot of Black women that are married to Serbian men. So they love Black women. If you're a good human being, you're a good person, colorism is not a problem here.
See, that's the second person. A few years ago, I reacted to a video where there's a woman that said the same thing. She said that people do stare at you there. And at first, depending on where you come from, you think they're staring at you because of the color of your skin. But then, even though I did a live, and somebody said, well, we don't see that many people of color, so it's kind of a novelty thing to a certain degree, which is understandable because I mean, if you like an Asian person or a white person and you go to a small island and let's say you're out in the countryside just walking around, everybody's gonna be like, what? Now, if it's in the city and stuff, yeah, because all the cruise ships come there, so people in the city center is used to it. But if you're walking around in the northern tip of the island, just by yourself, just walking around chilling, you're safe. Nobody's going to mess with you, but people are going to be like staring at you, like, whoa, what the vibe is. At least, when I was growing up, it might be different now. There might be more expats living there, so it's that people are kind of used. But back when I was a kid, it was like, what that person doing up here? You know what I'm saying? But it's not like, what are they doing here, man? They better, no.
Black women who want to live in Europe, we always flock to Spain or to Portugal or to the UK or to France. Those are all lovely places. But I would say recommend choosing Serbia because as a Black woman, you don't have to ever worry about someone being racist against you. And as we are in this movement of living our best life abroad, you definitely want to choose a place where there's no racism, that you are seen as a human, that you have, I guess, passport privilege. You can stretch your currency further. You can find love, friends, build community. There's so many different types of meetup groups, community, religious groups here. Even in my small religious community, I'm the only Black woman. But I stand out because I'm the only American. And I've been part of the community for like 3 years. And they love me. So it's really, I want to say, broaden your perspective when you think of Europe. Western Europe is not for me. But I would have to say the Balkans is a really, really underrated region where you can live a fabulous life. And if you want to go to Spain, you can take an easy flight. If you want to go to Switzerland, you can take a flight there. I've been to Zurich, it took an hour and a half. Turkey, which I used to live in, is an hour and a half. It's very easy to travel the continent, but to create a home base where you can live your best life, be in peace, and not worry about racism and classism and colorism and
Oh
texturism and
man,
these
she's giving the
microaggressions, it really
skimmy.
does affect you. I'm happy when I tell people I'm 34 years old and they're like, no. I'm like, well, I'm happy. I don't have the stress of racism or medical racism. Literally, black women are dying in the US because giving birth is so dangerous for us. If I have children, definitely have them here. So that is something to really consider. Serbia can be your home in 2025 or moving forward. It's a safe space, I believe, for black women. I want to talk about community and class dynamics. So in the US, and now that people are reaching this class consciousness, correct me if I'm wrong, sirs, but there is not much class division in Serbian society. Now people are getting wealthier. People are now sending their kids to private schools. But during Yugoslavia, and maybe not too long ago, everyone was kind of even. There was just a middle class. Yes, some people might have more, but it was not like the class stratification we see in the US. And these are certain neighborhoods, and these kids have all these opportunities. And for those are poor kids, and you can see a kid that's poor because they dress a certain way, they go to a certain school, their hair looks a certain thing, and your parents' profession is defined by the life opportunities that you have. Here in society, especially when I see with my boyfriend, many people are friends with their childhood friends. So whether someone's very wealthy, if you grew up with someone and they're your childhood friend, it doesn't matter how much money you make. That is your friend. Versus the US, as we grow up and go to university, as we move, people tend to be friends and with people in community that are of the same social class, same professions. And here people do socially mix, which I really like. In fact, living outside the US, in many cities that I lived in, whether I was in Bangkok or in Singapore or China, people do socially mix. And I really think that's what makes society peaceful and cohesive when you have a lot of social mixing between the group.
I tell you what, though, on the island, yeah, I think there's a little bit of social classism on the island. Uh, but the island is so small, though, people mix anyway. There's just no way that you could just have a social group that's that group you hang out with. People, everybody mixing, you know what I mean? Especially since with the festivals that we have and stuff. You know what I mean? Everybody knows everybody. Everybody hangs out with everybody. I hang out with everybody. I hang out with the people in the north, the country people. I hang out with the people in the city. I hang out with people who parents own hotels. I hang out with people who parents own stores. You know, and even though there is a school where like rich kids go to, it's mainly diplomats' kids and stuff, and and people who work in embassies, their kids go there. But as far as regular Grenadian kids and stuff, we all go to the same school. We all go into the Wesley College or to the Presentation Brothers College or to the Roman Catholic Boys School. We all went to the same school. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like that.
Yes, Belgrade waterfront, and there are some wealthier and affluent neighborhoods here. But in general, from what I observe, there's not a huge class division. People still can afford, even if you work in a grocery store, can afford to go on a holiday because everywhere around Europe it's quite close. Flights are cheap, buses are cheap, versus in the US, growing up, I think that I took one major family vacation. My mom and my sisters and my aunt, we drove all the way from Massachusetts to Florida and went to Disney World when I was 12. That was like the highlight. And sometimes when my grandparents lived in New York, we went to New York. So there's just not everyone can take big family trips. And what we see on social media, where everyone's going here and there, and it's clear like the haves and have nots. And as an adult, now that I live more abroad and I can travel, like this lifestyle I'm living is definitely not what I thought I would ever imagine living. And I didn't know many people that lived abroad or traveled abroad or worked abroad. That was just not my reality. So communities and people and friendships, at least today now in the US, it's very clear about who's wealthy, who's not, because of what you share on social media, the clothes you wear, the car you drive, um, the experiences that you have. It was clear growing up. I always wanted to be. I always wanted to do gymnastics. I did it maybe for 2 years, and then I had to quit because gymnastics is a very expensive sport. So here, I think there's just not as much class stratification. Yes.
Same thing with soccer. Soccer is considered an upper middle class sport here. You know what I mean? You don't see kids just kicking around a ball in a park and stuff like you would see them on the island or in Brazil, kicking around a soccer ball, It's weird how that is like that.
There are people struggling. There are people struggling everywhere. But people at least have the universal health care, free higher education, people live with their families, people inherit property because during Yugoslavia, the government gave free properties to people. So there is still a cohesive, strong middle class. The region is really friendly to Black women and you can live your best life. So let me know what your thoughts are if you want to move here. I do provide concierge services, so check out my website. Please subscribe, share, and let me know. Have you ever been to a country that there's no
That is kind of cool to know, you know what I mean? Because from what you hear about the Balkans and stuff, it's like just this dark place. And that's being lifted a little bit now, you know what I mean? But generally speaking, unless you dig deep into it and figure out what is what and what is not, you're gonna think from your own experience and not from what the reality is. You understand what I'm saying? And wow, that was kind of eye opening there. It's really cool to hear it from somebody who was living there. And that's the thing, because most of the Serbians on the channel saying there's no racism here, there's no racism here, you know what I mean? And they say that a lot, and it's like, boom, there we go. Somebody's experiencing it that's not from there. And that's kind of cool to know, man. I hope this has been educational to those who doesn't know. The Serbians already know. So if you guys want to add anything to this, please comment down below and let me know what the vibe is and thing. When I did the last live, somebody mentioned it there too, about there's no racism there. Hope you guys enjoyed this, learned something from it. Like I said, comment down below, share the video, check this lady's site out, see what she's got to say and thing like that. It's pretty cool. In the meantime, y'all take care of each other and let's try to bring some peace in this world, okay?